Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to the meeting of the Democratic Services Committee. Obviously, this meeting is being live screened, so the public are able to listening in and make what they want from it. So, are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, from
Councillor Thomas, thank you. And I understand that Councillor Corton may be late. Yeah. Okay, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Superb. And then we move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June, which you can find on pages 3 to 6. I don't plan to go through them page by page, but if anybody has anything that they wish to raise, can they do it now? Okay, so can we have somebody to agree the minutes, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. Done. Okay, item 4, and the guide to the Constitution. Mr. Price, are you dealing with this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You've got the report in front of you. This was on the work programme from last time. It's one of the outstanding matters that we had to deal with, just to pick up the changes introduced by the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021. Section 45 of that Act introduced a new requirement for the Council to prepare and publish a guide to the Constitution. Now, ever since 2000, we've had to have a written Constitution that sets out how the Council takes its decisions. But this is a separate document to that is more public-facing, if you like, in terms of explaining to members of the public in simple terms. It's not a technical document like the Constitution. It has to explain in plain and simple English how the Council operates, and more importantly, how members of the public can interact with the Council, access documents, and engage with the Council. You know, it's part of that wider sort of public participation engagement strategy that you've looked at previously. We're still awaiting final guidance on a lot of this new legislation from Welsh Government, and there is a requirement that when you do produce this guide, it has to comply and meet the requirements of that statutory guidance. So what we've done for the time being is based it on the draft statutory guidance that we've received from Welsh Government, and also a model that's been produced by the Welsh Local Government Association in conjunction with lawyers in local government. A team of solicitors in private practice were commissioned to produce a template for this guide. So what we followed in terms of the draft guide that we've attached to this report, it follows that model that's been prepared by the various associations. And we've just tailored it then to suit the Council's own internal governance processes. In terms of the guide itself, as I said, we've tried to make it as simple as we possibly can, but sort of condensing the best part of 1,000 pages into 2 sides of A4 is a bit problematic, really. So it's still quite a lengthy document, but because of the range of issues that it has to cover, then really it was difficult to condense it into anything shorter. As the report says, it focuses more on the public, where they can access the relevant parts of the Constitution and how they engage with you then in terms of decision making. It's not an annotated index to the Constitution. We've got that already. If an elected member wants to go to Council standing orders, they'll be directed to the relevant sections and relevant page numbers. This is a separate guide. It explains to members of the public what those standing orders are all about, what you're doing in Council in terms of decision making. So it's a much simplified version of that, and it would help people to try and navigate the various web pages and parts of what is a very complicated sort of constitutional document. So this is the simplified version. What we've included in the guide are lots of hyperlinks in terms of relevant policies and procedures. So it will then, if they click on those links, it will enable members of the public then to go directly to those parts of the Constitution or the policies that they need to access. So hopefully it helps in that sense in terms of simplifying the process. Not much more I want to say about the guide itself. As you see, it's split into 5 different parts as per the template that we've been provided with. The first bit is the explanation about why you need this guide to the Constitution and what it's all about. Part 2 is about the individual decision-making parts of the Council, all of its committees, what full Council does, what Cabinet and Cabinet members do, and in terms of accountability and responsibilities then, Part 3 will set out what level of decision-making there is within the Council and who is responsible and accountable for those decisions. Part 4 is a summary of all the key policies and documents that people might need to access, including the hyperlinks to those documents. And then finally, Part 5 explains to the public how they can get involved in decision-making and includes links to things like that participation and engagement strategy and the petition scheme that was adopted at Council in May. So that's before you today, Chair. Ideally, we would have consulted with the public on this. Because it's a public document, we would have consulted with them before adopting this. Unfortunately, we have to have this document in place as soon as possible just to meet the requirements of the legislation. So what we're suggesting is that we adopt this as a starter, if you like, in terms of the guide, just to comply with the legislation. And if you're happy with the document that we've produced, subject to any comments or changes that you might want to make as a committee, then what we're suggesting is you recommend to Council in November that you formally adopt this guide in order to comply with the legislation. However, having adopted it, as part of your forward work programme then as a committee, that you keep it under constant review and that you do consult with the public periodically in terms of how easy they find this. You know, could we improve it even further in terms of simplifying the access and explaining things in perhaps a bit more detail. So what we're suggesting is this is a dynamic document. You adopt this as a starter, and then as with other things, you keep it under review and improve it as you go along as part of your forward work programme. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Price. I think if members look at pages 17 to 19 of the document, it gives a good sort of flavour of what the document is about and the kind of questions that the public might want to ask. And I think if we go forward to just agree this today and put it forward to Council, members can then look through this and make some decisions about whether they think there's something that we've missed, something that needs to be added. I think that's probably the best way forward. Are there any questions or points that anyone would like to make? Okay, can I have a proposal?
Yes, please, if I may, Chair. I appreciate everything Mr Price has said and your suggested way forward. But could I just maybe highlight more than clarify a few points? We talked about public feedback. So who will be the wide groups that will be engaged with, and when are we likely to get the first? When are we likely to get the first public feedback?
I mean, Leanne might want to come in on that in terms of the broader sort of public engagement and participation consultation. But as a committee, it's entirely up to you, I suppose, how you want to engage with the public and whether there are particular sort of sections of the community that you want to consult over this. So in terms of how you consult, that's entirely up to you. Obviously, the Council has got various ways that it consults with the public in terms of online questionnaires and so on. So I think that's something you could build into your work programme and agree amongst yourselves what is the best way of communicating with the public going forward. I don't know if Leanne wants to come in on the process.
Thank you. Last year, this year in May, we adopted our participation strategy, which again was in order to comply with legislation, but it set out what our start of a 10 was in terms of how we engage with the public. So there were some key objectives and themes that we set in there, but the feedback during consultation with the public at that time was that we did more than engage online, and we looked to engage with some of the harder to reach groups that perhaps we don't hear their voices as often. So there is some work in development on that, and that's something that we could bring back to the committee in future meetings.
Are you happy with that response, Councillor Hoodhine?
I would prefer more specific groups mentioned, but yes, in general. I do have some other points, but how do you want to move forward, Chair? I notice Councillor Watkins has put his hand up, and unfortunately I can't get my hand up to work, I'm afraid.
I'm happy to take any further points from you. I'm sure Councillor Watkins just might wait a couple of moments.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Page 29, part 4.5. Councillors may request a recorded vote. Now, I'm sure, Chair, you're familiar with this procedure, but how many councillors will be required to request a recorded vote, or can an individual councillor record that?
It's 5 councillors in the council standing orders.
Yep.
Like I said, this is the simplified guide for members of the public. For councillors, we would take you to council standing orders, and that will tell you precisely how many members must request a recorded vote before the matter is put to vote. So that's in council standing orders. We haven't got the numbers here simply because this is the guide to members of the public.
Yep. But surely that very simple number put in there would help everybody. Then we move on to, or I move on to page 34, and that's the Standards Committee. And I know, Mr. Price, you're very familiar with this committee. Ex-councillors are not allowed to sit on this committee, as far as I understand, but it doesn't state that there.
Again, this is a simplified guide, and we've tried to keep it as short as we possibly can. I think if we put in every single thing that was in the Constitution, it would run to a few hundred pages again. So apologies if we've taken out any detail that you think is relevant. You're quite right. Ex-councillors are not classed as independent, neither as are ex-officers. So independent members of Standards Committee are truly independent of the council. That's all set out in detail in the Constitution itself and the terms of reference of Standards Committee. So what we can't do within the amount of detail that we can put within the guide is include every sort of single detail about every single committee and how it operates. This is more an overview. It's a flavour for members of the public about what those committees do, and if they want to find out the rules about what are independent members or how many people can request a recorded vote, it will take them to the relevant parts of the Constitution where that detail is included.
Okay, thank you. And the last point, if I might, Chair, page 57. A councillor can raise an issue with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That is a councillor independent of that committee. There's no mechanism as to how that would be achieved. And I believe this is something new. But again, I stand to be corrected.
It's not new. It goes back to the original Act in 2000. Individual councillors have always had the right to refer matters to scrutiny. Again, that's all contained on the scrutiny web pages and the guide that's being produced for scrutiny members. But in terms of the right of individual councillors to request an item that goes on the work programme for scrutiny, that's always been there since the year 2000.
Right, thank you. It's just, well, to my knowledge, never been invoked then.
It has. It's not used that frequently, I have to say. Usually it's done collectively through the committees themselves. When they look at their forward work programme, they tend to agree collectively the issues that they want to look at. But there is still scope there for individual members to put a request in. That will then go to the various chairs to see if it can be accommodated within the work programme. There's something different also within the scrutiny handbook in terms of councillor call for action, where there's a statutory right in terms of certain sort of crime and disorder issues. But in terms of any review, any scrutiny review, any individual member can ask that a matter is considered for inclusion on the work programme.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Just to be helpful, Councillor, you can also call in Cabinet member decisions as well. That process has always been there if you need to do it.
So just to clarify, there's always been a call-in process, but the Council's call-in process is only if the decision was unconstitutional or unlawful. What we don't have as a Council, through Standards Committee, is a member call-in process on the merits of the decision. So there's a sort of a subtle difference there in terms of how our call-in system works. Thankfully, we've never had a successful call-in because if Leanne and I are doing our jobs properly, then we shouldn't let decisions go through that are either unconstitutional, that we haven't gone through the right decision-making process, or unlawful. So our call-in is something different. What we do have in Newport, of course, is a quite comprehensive system of pre-decision consultation. So all members see every report and they get a chance to comment before decisions are taken, rather than call-in decisions afterwards.
Thank you.
Councillor Watkins?
Thank you, Chair. What concerns me is the fact that it's a draft report and we're being asked to adopt it in November. I have concerns about this because we don't know all of the legislation that is coming forward, and we're asked to adopt it in November. If we do, I got a problem, let's say, provisionally adopt it and review it in 6 months' time with obviously further information which is likely to come forward.
Yeah, just to be clear, Chair, the legislation is already in force. The legislation sets out the minimum requirements for this guide, and that's why we're recommending that you take this to Council and you adopt something now just to comply with the legislation. What we're still waiting for is the final guidance from Welsh Government. We've had the draft guidance for some time, and we're reasonably comfortable that not much is going to change with that anyway. But as we said, this is a dynamic document. We're suggesting that you keep it under constant review anyway. So if for some reason there are any changes in the guidance in due course, then we can always bring it back to committee and you can update the guide to reflect that. But this is fully compliant with the legislation and it fully complies with the template that's been produced in agreement with Welsh Government and WLGA. So I don't think we've got any concerns about the status of this particular document as things stand at the moment, but I agree entirely, you will need to keep it under review.
Okay, can I suggest then that when we do get the final guidance from Welsh Government, that it comes back to committee for approval and obviously then back to Council for approval?
Yes, absolutely. We would have to do that anyway, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further points or questions? No. Could I ask somebody to move the report then, please?
I will, Chair.
Thank you. And seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you. That's moved and seconded. So item 5 then is the amendments to the Constitution, Cabinet job sharing and executive assistance, which can be found on pages 63 to 76. Mr. Price, it's you again, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, one of the legislative changes introduced by the 2021 Act is the right for cabinet posts to be job shared, and also the right for the leader to appoint assistants to the executive. So this report really just updates the relevant parts of the Constitution just to reflect that. To a certain extent, we're playing catch-up here because obviously the leader has already appointed a job share arrangement in Cabinet in terms of the Cabinet member for social services post. But what we need to do is put provision within the Constitution itself to reflect the legislative requirements and also to explain how that operates in practice within the Council's decision-making processes. So that's what we've got here, and attached to the report are suggested amendments to Article 7 of the Constitution. That's the part of the Constitution that sets out how the Cabinet and executive arrangements work. So we've amended that just to reflect that up to 3 posts on cabinet can be job shared if the leader was minded to agree those. As far as the post of leader of the council is concerned, that of course is a council appointment, although it's nominated by the majority group. It is formally a council appointment at the AGM. So ultimately it would be a decision for council as to whether the leader of the council post should be job shared. It's not something the council can prescribe. Effectively, 2 people would have to put their names forward and be nominated jointly to job share as leader. So again, that is something that we've updated in the Constitution just to reflect the council's processes about how the leader is appointed. As far as the other cabinet member posts are concerned, the leader appoints her cabinet, and therefore she will decide which, if any, cabinet posts should be job shared. There are a number of principles set out in the guidance, draft guidance, again coming back to Trevor Watkins' point, in terms of the guidance and the legislation in terms of the reasons for job sharing. And it's clear that the reason for this is not just to increase the numbers of posts on the cabinet or to ease workload. This is more about improving diversity and work-life balance, and also succession planning in terms of membership of the cabinet or the executive. So those are the factors that the leader will take into account when deciding if particular cabinet posts should be job shared. And again, we've written those into the cabinet terms of reference in the Constitution just to make that abundantly clear. Again, in terms of how the job share works with cabinet-style decision-making, it's a job share, and therefore the 2 job share cabinet members have a single vote between them. So again, we have to make provision within the Constitution as to how that will work in practice. Effectively, they both have to agree as to how that vote will be exercised in cabinet meetings, for example. If they can't agree, then what we've put here is that vote doesn't count. They have to be in total alignment and agreement in terms of how they cast their vote. They don't have 2 separate votes. They have to agree amongst themselves how they will cast that vote jointly. The other issue then, in terms of individual cabinet member decision making, is how they would both sign off a report, for example, in this case in social services. What we have not done, as I understand it, in Newport, in terms of dividing up the cabinet member responsibility for social services, is actually allocate tasks to particular job sharers. So effectively, all of the terms of reference, the decision making in relation to social services, that's delegated to the cabinet members, the 2 job sharers, they exercise that role jointly. So again, they will jointly sign off decisions or reports that they have to take in terms of the scheme of delegation. Again, as with voting a cabinet, they have to agree that decision. If for any reason there was disagreement between the 2 cabinet members and they couldn't sign off that report, then we've written into the Constitution that written report then goes to the leader of the council for a decision, rather than for those cabinet members to disagree over what should or shouldn't be decided. So again, we've made that provision to make it clear how those joint arrangements should work in practice. So that's job sharing. In terms of assistance to the executive, these are additional members who can be appointed again at the discretion of the leader to help cabinet members. Not dissimilar, I suppose, to some of the council champions in terms of how they get involved in particular discrete areas of work where they've got a particular expertise in some area. They can then help the cabinet members in terms of decision making and in terms of that type of work within their portfolio. They don't have a vote at cabinet. They're not full executive members. They don't get paid a senior salary. They're there purely as assistants to the members who serve on the cabinet. They're entitled to attend and speak at cabinet meetings, but they don't have a vote, and they're not part of the decision making. They're not accountable or responsible for those cabinet decisions, but they're there as personal assistants, if you like, to the members on the executive. So again, the legislation makes provision for those assistants to be appointed. So we have to update the constitution to reflect the fact that there is that discretion now to appoint these additional members. There's no financial implication for that because these executive members, they don't count towards the numbers on the executive, and they don't carry a senior salary. So we've made the amendments, Chair, to the relevant parts of the Constitution. Again, we need to get those changed now as soon as possible, just to reflect what's happening in practice. So, subject to any comments that you may have in terms of the proposed amendments or changes, then again we would recommend that you take this to Council in November, and that full Council agrees to amend the Constitution to reflect these changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Are there any comments or questions? I don't see anybody indicating, so can I have a proposer for the report, please?
I propose, Chair.
And a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Okay, that's moved. Thank you very much. So the next item is item 6, Independent Remuneration Panel Draft Annual Report, pages 77 to 84. Mr. Price.
Sorry, we think that the all you've had circulated with the agenda papers are the questions at the end of the IRP report rather than the report itself. So if that's the case, we will send out a copy of the report to all of the members. Had it? No. Okay. I think that's been emailed out to councillors this morning. If you want to read it, thankfully it's a lot shorter than the normal report. They've changed the way in which these annual reports or draft reports are set out this year. So it's just a few summary pages, really, in terms of what the proposals are. It came in too late for us to actually produce a proper cover report for you, but in essence, that not much changes, really, in terms of what they're proposing from next year. Essentially, there'll be an uplift of 4.76%, an inflationary uplift in terms of all the member allowances, both the basic salaries for councillors and then the senior salaries that are paid to the leader, the members of the executive and chairs and civic chairs. So it literally is just a flat rate update this time. You'll remember from last time, as from last May, there was a significance of rebasing of all the salaries as from the start of the new council term. So there are no other changes other than just uplifting the current rates in line with inflation. Now, normally, committee would not make any comment about the amount of payment because you don't think it's appropriate. So I'm assuming there won't be any comments in terms of what is being proposed here. All of the other allowances, travelling subsistence, the allowances paid to co-opted members, none of those will change as from next April. However, and this is what you were sent with the agenda, there were a number of sort of specific consultation questions at the end of the report, where they asked for your particular comments. So I don't know whether you want to have a look at those particular questions and whether, as a committee, you have any comments or observations on those. Question 1 at the end of the agenda is really whether you think it's right that they should base these salaries on the average earnings, in terms of the annual survey of hours and earnings. So I think that whether you want to deal with these individually, one by one. So if you want to look at that question first in terms of question 1. Does the committee agree that the salaries for members should be based on average earnings and these published figures?
Okay, so the questions can be found in your pack from page 77 through to 79. Councillor Watkins, your hand is up, so you're first.
Yeah, just a comment, Chair. Do you think it's appropriate for us to comment on this IRP document as it affects all councillors? Surely there's a conflict of interest.
No, well, they are specifically inviting for your comments as elected members. Not in terms of how much you get paid, but just the principles in terms of how these allowances are based. So, and there's no conflict of interest because we say this when you adopt the scheme of allowances in full council. You all have a special dispensation when it comes to this because you're all equally affected by it. So there are no concerns about you passing comments. This is not about how much you should get paid, but how those basic salaries are, how they're worked out and what they're based on. So the first question, yeah, literally is it right that members' allowances should be linked to average earnings?
Right. Okay. Thank you, Chair. That's okay.
Is it possible, Mr. Price, that we could put these questions out to all members for them to respond, or would that not be appropriate?
I think it's going to be difficult, to send it out to 51 members, for some sort of response, which is why we bring it here. I mean, clearly it's within the terms of reference of Democratic Services Committee to respond to these types of questions. So it's been delegated to you in the past. So unless you particularly wanted to canvass the views of all 51 members, then the view would be that we would take the committee view on this and how you wanted to respond.
So there are two options for you, colleagues, but this is your opportunity to make your points, I suppose, on behalf of your colleagues as well. So does anybody want to ask any of the questions that are in here, or is everybody satisfied that they're reasonably informed and that we move on?
I'm happy to move on, Chair.
Sorry, when you say move on?
We can take it to council.
Well, we don't take the consultation to council because it doesn't,
No,
like I said, this is...
Panel.
Right. At the moment, it's a draft report. It's with you for information, for consultation and for comment. Yeah. Subject to any consultation responses, what will then happen is they will produce their final report in February or March of next year. Then it will be taken account, and that will then form the basis of your new scheme of allowances from April of next year. But at this stage, it's a draft proposal, it's a draft report, and they are specifically asking for any comments you might wish to make on those questions set out in the agenda. If the committee doesn't wish to make any consultation response at all, then that's fine. But this is the opportunity to make any specific observations or comments in relation to those questions. The questions towards the end are more about how they consult with you. Do you want to be part of a future consultation in terms of how these salaries are worked out? So they're more general questions towards the end. I understand what Councillor Watkins is saying. You may feel that question one, you should say you've got no opinion because it is basing your allowances on average salaries. Now, you might think that you've got too much of an interest in that and you don't want to express an opinion on that one. But I say later on, some of the questions are more about future consultation, discussions about member workload and so on. So more general issues that you might want to comment on.
Councillor Watkins?
Thank you, Chair. So what Mr. Price is saying is then, are the committee want to comment on it, or can the committee individually comment on it?
I'm not suggesting we're asking for a collective view, and it's been sent to the council for a collective view rather than for us to send this round 51 members and ask 51 members or just the members of this committee to fill in the responses individually. What we would like is a collective response, if you have one. Like I said, if you don't wish as a committee to respond to the consultation, and you haven't in the past, then that's equally as fine. But like I said, there are some general questions at the end that we felt it was right to bring to your attention, just in case that you you wanted to say that you would like to be involved in any future discussions about workload and how the salaries are worked out.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
So is everybody satisfied that we don't wish to ask any questions, and we just move on now?
Chair, I think we should, as a committee, opt for the idea of being involved in future communications with this panel. We shouldn't just cut our options off by saying we don't want to be involved at all.
I don't think we're saying that we don't want to be involved at all. Members have been given the opportunity now to make comment or ask these questions if they wish to do so. If you feel that you want to ask a question, Councillor, then feel free to do so.
That was only question 5 I was specifically referring to, Chair.
It might be easy, Chair, if we go through the questions one by one, and then we can take a view perhaps in terms of whether it's appropriate to comment. Like I said, question 1 is specifically about linking salaries to average earnings. Now, if members feel uncomfortable about responding to that, we could just tick the box to say you've got no opinion on it.
Okay. So there's question 1. So
I'm happy to do that, Chair.
Okay. Question 2 is about community council expenses. So again, I'm assuming you'd have no particular comments on that. That is just about what community councils could get repaid in terms of certain expenses. So again, it doesn't affect this council. So if you're happy with that, again, we can sort of tick the box for no opinion on question 2.
do we have an agreement on that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Question 3.
So question 3 is about gathering evidence about workload. In terms of workload of councils and how that will inform future determinations. I just asked the question, are you content that the panel should build this review into its future work plan? And that the workload of members should be taken into account?
I agree there, Chair. I would go for yes. Because of the future.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that, Trevor. So, yeah. Other members have any comment on that particular question?
Okay. Question 4 is just about the way they present this report. So as you will see when you open the attachment that we've sent you by email, it's a much smaller and reduced report. And this is just any comments you might have about how you would like to receive the report and guidance in future. And there's a number of options there in terms of how you access it. Again, it's up to you whether you've got any, when you wish to express any preference there.
No preference, really, Chair. No preference at all.
Any other members?
I'll just carry on as we are already, Chair.
Which is the summary report and links to detailed guidance. Yeah, I think rather than try and access it via the website or frequently asked questions, I think what we have now is adequate. So yeah, we can tick the first box on that one if you're happy.
That's fine.
Question 5 then is about engagement events. In terms of how they will engage with future, with the councils or councillors in future and other stakeholders. How would you like to be? Would you like to be involved first of all in terms of engagement with the IRP? Just to say, in previous years, I know the chair of Democratic Services Committee and the chair of Standards Committee have been interviewed or have had discussions with representatives from the panel to talk about things like workload and members' allowances. So you have been engaged in that in the past. So I'm assuming that you would want to continue to be involved in that engagement process.
Yeah, Chair, that's the one I specifically wanted to say yes to, because as I say, I don't think we should cut off our options.
I agree there, Chair. Second them.
And again, in terms of how you'd like to be consulted, I assume you would still prefer either face-to-face or virtual meetings rather than some online poll or other means of being consulted?
Yes, that's correct, Gareth.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes.
We'll complete that accordingly.
Yeah, that concludes that. And that concludes the meeting. So the date of the next meeting now is Tuesday, the 21st of February at 10 a.m. We're probably going to move into a committee room rather than use the council chamber, because the facilities are there for us to use in a committee room, which I think would probably be better. It's sort of three of us sort of rattling around in here. I'm mindful of the times of the meetings at 10 a.m. I have no issue. You can have them at whatever time you want. If you feel that 10 a.m. is all the time is not right for you, and you wanted to do an afternoon or an evening, that's fine by me. But otherwise, we'll stay with 10 a.m. Does anybody have any comment or issue around that?
No, I don't.
No, Chair.
Could I just comment on moving to a committee room, Chair? Overview and Scrutiny Committee has met, I think, 3 times now. We did do it in the council chamber. When you move to a committee room, there's very poor visibility. You really look like rugby players on the old Arms Park. When you're up in the top tiers, you can't see who's. You can hear them well enough, but you can't see who's talking. And the people who've chosen to come in from at home or whatever, they predominate the meeting, if you like. So you might like to look at a recording before you make that decision, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, just wanted to add, since those meetings, Councillor Hohein, we have worked out how to zoom in and out within the committee rooms, so that would be something that we would run through at another time with you. But yeah, just to confirm, that's been changed.
Okay, thank you, Leanne.
Yes, again, just to pick up on that point, you would not have the same broadcasting facility in the meeting rooms that you've got in this council chamber. The public eye system will obviously identify members and will give you a close-up, quite literally, and will name you at the bottom of the screen. We don't have the public eye system in the meeting rooms, but as Leanne said, the Teams functionality and those screens in the committee rooms do allow you to sort of zoom in, if you like, in terms of the people grouped around the table. It's not an individual shot, as it were. You won't have the same broadcasting facilities you've got here, but if there's only sort of 3 or 4 of you sat around the table, then it does work. But yeah, you would be sacrificing the broadcast quality for a more comfortable meeting room, shall we say, in terms of the people who are attending.
I think we can agree on that. And of course, for me, it would be nice to see some of you in the Civic Centre as well. So.
Sorry, Chair. Before you go, on the work programme, the Democratic Services annual report is due to go to Council in November. Now, unfortunately, because we had to postpone one of these meetings due to that period of public mourning, then we're out of sync in terms of the meetings. And because your next scheduled meeting won't be until the new year, then we will miss that chance to take the annual report to Council in November. So what we're suggesting is that we actually draft something. The annual report for new members is a summary of the work that the committee has done in the last sort of 12 months, and you take it annually to Council for information purposes, really. If you're happy, Chair, we can draft the annual report and we'll email it around members then for comments in the next sort of couple of weeks, and then we can then produce something collectively, hopefully by agreement, that we can then take to Council in November. I think that would be better than perhaps waiting until the new year. Otherwise, there'll be a big gap in between the last annual report, which was in last November's Council, and this year's annual report. So if members are happy with that, we'll draft something as officers and email it round to all the members. And then if you've got comments as individuals, perhaps you can get back to us within the next sort of couple of weeks, and then we'll produce a report for Council in November then.
So, Councillor Watkins, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I agree with what Mr. Price says in regards to the annual report. By all means, email it round. What concerns me, not concerns, but just a thought, I'm assuming that Democratic Services is a public meeting if people a member of the public want to come and listen. If that's the case, how do they manage in a smaller room if we move out of the council chamber?
Yeah, we've always had public seating in all the committee rooms, particularly committee room 1. There is seating room for members of the public in all the committee rooms, so that it shouldn't inconvenience the public if we moved from this council chamber into the meeting rooms, unless of course hundreds of people wanted to turn up to view one of these meetings. But assuming they don't, then the seating arrangement should be more than adequate in the committee rooms. Like I said, all you'd be sacrificing is the quality of this broadcast. It would be run like a fully remote Teams meeting then, and what was being broadcast then on the webcast. The people dialing in remotely would still be seen individually on the screen, but those of you sat in the room, like the 3 councillors here today, there'd be a collective sort of view, albeit not as distant as Councillor Horain was saying. There would be a collective view of the members then sat around the meeting room. So that's the only difference in terms of managing these meetings in the committee rooms compared with this chamber.
Okay, that's all I was concerned about, that it didn't affect the, I could say the general public if they wanted to view and come to the committee meetings. That was all, Chair. Thank you.
No, Trevor, just like the good old days of planning in room 1. Okay, well, that concludes the meeting. Thank you all very much for attending.